Okay, Jonathan, you can look at me.
Uh-huh.
Are you cool?
Yeah, I was just daydreaming.
Good. Okay. All right. Hey, when you're talking, can you look at that thing and see if it should show you levels?
Yeah.
Can you see those levels?
It goes up above -12. Now it's way up to 0.
Okay.
Yeah, I have it on auto balance, and it works. I've never had any problem with it.
All right.
Okay, so go ahead and just talk about yourself, say what your name is, and your relationship with the school district here in Rome and stuff like that.
Okay, my name's Jonathan Weaver, and I've been working for Rome City Schools for, well, this is 12 years, and my relationship with this property started before I started working for the school system. I was taking classes at Floyd College, which is now Georgia Highlands, and Dr. Billy Morris was teaching geology. I took his physical geology class and his historical geology class. And during this historical geology class, part of his extra credit was to attend this town hall meeting for CAN, Citizens Action Network. And it was fledgling at the time, and I said, yeah, I'll do that. He was pretty impactful on my understanding of geology. It really kind of put me in an understanding of my place in the world. It was a nice experience. So I went to the town hall meeting, and he gave us some background knowledge about how GE had been using this chemical in their transformers that they had over the years disposed of in various ways, and we were just kind of looking at what impact that might have had on the area. And so I went to the meeting, and I was fairly educated at the time about the situation, and I could tell that the atmosphere of the meeting was a little edgy, I guess, and I'm not one to not jump in the middle of it, so I asked him a question specifically about the chemical, and at that point I was addressed by the operations manager pretty directly at the time, and so it kind of set a fire under me, and I wanted to be involved, and it turned out to be a pretty good experience. So as far as Rome City Schools, I do a summer camp lesson on point source pollution, and I use the GE site as my model. And kids get it; they get the lesson, and over the years, it's become an integral part of this Young Scholars Camp. I guess this is probably 7th year maybe going on it, and so I've reached out to probably 700, 800 kids about point source pollution, understanding that it is an issue that needs to be addressed. So, as far as Rome City Schools now, I work in a program with youth doing project-based learning to teach social skills and behavioral modification. And, still, we reach out in the community and do our part. But, my involvement with Citizens Action Network was probably one of the best experiences I had, just because it kind of got me an understanding of what was going on in Rome at the time, as far as what we can do as a group, especially as an educator, being able to reach a lot of different kids.
Do you have concerns about the proximity of these schools to this particular site?
Well, going through physical geology, we had to do some contour maps, and this was one of the areas. And yeah, I noticed that the way that the land contoured into Little Dry Creek, it kind of seemed like, if there were some point source pollution, it would make its way into this creek that runs right beside West Central, and eventually meanders over to West End and Somerville Park, and there were a lot of areas that could easily be impacted, where kids are playing and getting in the mud as they should, and that we know that mud is the thing that carries it. So sure, yeah, definitely a concern of mine. That's what, I didn't have kids at the time, but that's why I wanted to get involved in it.
So, restate this, but Billy Morris was your first introduction to the idea or the whole issue of PCB contamination in Rome?
Yeah, when I was taking Dr. Morris's class, like I said, Citizens Action Network, CAN, was a fledgling group at that time, and that was their focus. He was using the word PCB. I'd never heard it before. Used the word pyranol. It sounded kind of flammable, so I wasn't really familiar or understood what he was talking about. But as I went through physical geology and then later historical geology with Dr. Morris, like I said, just finding your place in the world is a really nice thing to have, and historical geology did that for me. So at that moment, with the knowledge that I'd had, from physical geology, that it was kind of a great starting point for me to get involved, not only in the community, but just to understand the world around me. So yeah, absolutely, Dr. Morris is, he came from the oil fields and found his way into Rome, Georgia, and has been a huge part of it. In fact, he's come back a couple of times to do classes where he brings his rock collection, and shows the kids, the 3 different types of rocks, takes them through the rock cycle, and he's a rock hound, so he does great with kids, and good motivator. Yeah, that Billy Morris, good one.
So with your work at the schools, did you see during after you had left Georgia Highlands and got involved in the Rome Floyd School District, what did you see happening at West End Elementary that might relate to this? What, you had already familiarized yourself with it, but what were you seeing from that vantage point as an employee there?
Well, I mean, like this playground, the West End playground was built in preparation. If it ever flooded, that was the part that was going to be okay, right? And it does. These areas flood pretty readily, all right? And so those little tributaries, those little side creeks, Little Dry Creek, and there's a couple little tributaries, I don't know the names of them, but they're all over the place. If things are going to wash through that mud and it's going to end up in the playground, that always was in the back of my mind, and it kind of still is. I mean, even this one, I'm sitting here right now looking at this playground. I walked across that muddy field and I'm thinking to myself, how much of that is contaminated? Why wouldn't it be contaminated if it hasn't been removed? So, yeah, it's still a concern of mine for these schools. This is West Central. West End's over there. Elm Street's not far away. It is on the other side of Turner McCall, or shorter at that point, but I don't think it's as much of an issue. But there's tons of neighborhoods. These neighborhoods, kids play in the woods. They play in the creeks. I live in Somerville Park, and that is a very popular park. That creek still flows through there, and mud's coming from the GE areas.
Can you talk about your observation of trucks leaving the GE site?
Well, as I was going back and forth to West End, I started working at West End in 2005, and a lot of litigation had happened by that point, and there had been numbers of tens of $1 millions thrown around. I don't know exactly what was going on, but I know that they were having to remediate it at some point to some degree. And so what I would notice is, there were monitoring stations set up, but early in the morning, there would be these trucks full of dirt leaving the area, leaving the GE area. There seemed to be like a little staging area across the road. I don't know for a fact that that's what it was, but there was a Tommy Roberts Trucking Company, and you would see, and it was always the same type truck lined up from about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, heading away from the site. I don't know where they went from there, but it was truck after truck after truck leaving with that good old Georgia red clay in the back of it. from the site. But other than that, you know, I still see monitors out there every once in a while, and, you know.
What are your thoughts on this new bike park?
You know, I read in the paper where I think there was like $5,000 or something like that donated by GE to help out with the park, and like I said before, I don't know what all, you know, numbers were thrown around to remediate this situation, but apparently there was needed remediation. And you know, I've talked to some folks that have worked from GE, and they've at the closing they knew without a doubt that there needed to be 100% remediation. Well, to my knowledge, I mean, I don't know if they've removed all this dirt out here in this bike trail, and I mean, I don't know if you're a mountain biker, but if you get on a mountain bike on a muddy trail and that stuff's slinging all over the place, slinging on you, slinging on the folks behind you. So, you know, I don't necessarily want a bunch of Pyranol soaked, oil soaked mud all over me, taken home to my kids and dog. And anyway, I you know, it's a good idea. I hope they've done what they're supposed to do. But you know, nobody's ever come out and said, yeah, we remediated the whole thing. It's just kind of been undisclosed. So as far as a citizen of Rome, I'm not going to go out there and ride on that path. You know, not just principle, but you know, for safety's sake. I just assume my kids not go either.
I don't know if we want to. Do you have lingering questions for Jonathan, Paul?
You've actually handled it quite well.
I am an anthropologist.
You what?
I said I am an anthropologist. I'm supposed to.